Today on the Big 6 in 60, the Magic take a win over the Timberwolves.
The Orlando Magic are whole again.
The Falcons forced to make moves on the offensive line.
Big changes for the Falcons offensive line.
And the Thunder clinched the top seed in the West.
The Thunder sweep the back-to-back between the Lakers and Clippers.
This is the Big 6 in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big 6 in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Magic beat the Timberwolves 132-120 for a fourth straight win, and Orlando moved up to 7th in the East with 2 games to play in the regular season. Philip Rossman-Reich has the recap on Locked On Magic.
The Orlando Magic are whole again, even with the little scare in the third quarter. Franz Wagner, Anthony Black, the whole crew back together, and it feels so good. Why the Magic being back together sets them up for a big postseason push, and why Goga Bitadze shows everybody is still in. We'll get to that coming up here we're going to get to that right now, actually, because we're changing the way we do our intros. The Orlando Magic have not felt whole all year. Like, just plain and simple. Like we were talking with Paolo Banchero in the locker room. We talked with Franz Wagner. Like, everyone acknowledges injuries are the story of the season. In fact, it was a scary moment. Like, the lead story today really is the scary moment that happened early in the third quarter. Again, just 4 games into his comeback from missing 47 last 51 games, Franz Wagner gets caught kind of in the middle of a scrum for a rebound, hyperextends his left knee, and immediately leaves the game, immediately takes himself out of the game to go get checked. Everybody held their breath, and as things do when there's no information, there was a lot of hand-wringing, a lot of concern, and Magic fans are obviously very, very worried too. But honestly, to me, this moment shows me how much this team has grown and how much this team has changed over the last few weeks or during this 4-game win streak that the Magic are currently on. Because at that time, the Magic were winning. Like, they were up. They'd kind of given away their 10-point lead. It gotten down to as little as 3. When Franz Wagner left the game, the Magic were up only 5. Their 10-point halftime lead was cut in half. By the time Wagner checked back in, who, by the way, was perfectly all right, no problems, no worse for the wear, played like another 5 minutes in this game. When Franz Wagner checked back into the game with 2:44 left in the third quarter, the Magic were up by 20. Franz even joked about it in the postgame saying, because when we asked him about, like, what did the Magic do to extend the lead out in the third quarter, he said, like, man, I wish I was out there so I could tell you what we did. This team feels whole. This team feels unflappable. This team feels like they're starting to find themselves. And I get it. Game 80. Why is a team trying to find itself at game 80? But we know this team can be really good. Everyone on the team acknowledges how good they can be. You should be able to acknowledge that, yeah, when this team is healthy, when this team is working, when this team has all of the pieces together, they're pretty good. They can do a lot of really good things. And we can see games like this where the Magic score 132 points, have a 130 offensive rating, get 32 assists on 51 field goals. And it was a lot closer. The ratio was a lot closer for good chunks of the game, where the team can get down and have these really just amazing defensive efforts. Paolo Banchero said it quite simply in the locker room after the game. Just having Franz and AB back changes everything about this team. And sure, Franz still playing only 21 and a half minutes. Most minutes of the season, or most minutes since coming back, by the way, and probably shortened or curtailed because he missed all that time in the third quarter, getting checked out, getting his knee checked out. Anthony Black played 16 minutes, only one for 4 from the floor for 7 points, had 5 fouls, like 3 turnovers. It wasn't like these guys are perfect. The Magic are not operating at full tilt quite yet. But nonetheless, this team is doing things. This team has something working. This team, regardless of who the opponent is. Because again, like Minnesota sat 4 of their 5 starters, no Ant Edwards, no Rudy Gobert, no Julius Randle, no Mike Conley, no Ayo Dosunmu. Like the Magic didn't play the Minnesota Timberwolves. They played the Timber Puppies. And I say that affectionately because Jaden McDaniels had a great game, and Naz Reid is Naz Reid, and Dante DiVincenzo is Dante DiVincenzo. This is the Wolves are stuck in the 6th seed. They know that. They were on the back-to-back. They rested their veterans. The Magic are going to see that probably on Sunday if Boston can take care of one of New York or New Orleans and clinch the 2 seed. You got to take care of the team in front of you, and that's something the Magic haven't always done. But this was simply just a masterful effort. And you could feel the impact of having everyone together, not just on the court. Because Franz Wagner, 17 points, 7 for 13 shooting, had a really solid game. Like you could tell his timing was still off on some passes and on some reads. Like he's not all the way back yet. But just having him on the floor changes things. Just having him on the floor gives this team a different dynamism. You know, I talked about this a bunch over the last, or during the losing streak especially, where it just didn't feel like the Magic had anyone who could create outside of Paolo. Adding in Franz, adding in AB, those are 2 guys that can create. They can get downhill, get to the paint. And having those guys create means you're kicking out to a Desmond Bane or Jalen Suggs or Paolo Banchero, who are now attacking closeouts instead of trying to beat a set defense. That changes everything. And so I'm not surprised Orlando shot 53.7%. I'm not surprised with the confidence this team is playing with that they had 64 points in the paint. I'm not surprised they shot 12 of 29 from 3. I'm not surprised they're still getting 23 free throw attempts and forcing their way to the line. I'm not surprised this team looks more like the team we envisioned. Are they perfect? Heck no. Defense was rough for long stretches. They were scoring with Minnesota, or Minnesota was scoring with them, however you want to phrase it. The Wolves shot 50% from the floor, and that was boosted by an end game run. Game was decided. Bench players were in. Like the Magic's deep bench guys, like Mo Wagner, Alex Morales, who had a great game, minus 10. Alex was minus 10. Like Noah Penda minus 8, Jace Richardson minus 8, like Colin Castleton minus 7. Like the deep bench guys gave away a good chunk of this lead. This was really a like 19, 20-point game, not a 12-point game. The Sharps were not happy with how close this one got at the end. But very, very clearly, like, it's not rocket science to say this. Having your best players all out on the floor together, it's not just a boost on the court, which it clearly is. It is an emotional boost too. And, you know, Paolo said, maybe this was hindsight being 2020. Paolo said he was not worried that Franz was coming back in the game. While we were all fretting in the stands and fretting on the media row and not wondering like, oh, what's going on? Like they got to shut him down. It's got to be over. The Magic went out and did their work. And there is something to just doing your work. There is something to just getting the job done. I know you shouldn't be, just like against Detroit, I saw the comments after the Pistons game, the New Orleans game, the Dallas game. I know these are not elite opponents. The Magic haven't beaten a postseason team with their full roster since Phoenix. That was 6 games ago now. You beat the teams in front of you. And guess what? At this juncture, all of these wins count the same. Are the Magic ready to play in the playoffs? Are the Magic ready for the intensity of a playoff series? They got to take it up a notch. You can tell, like, the way I describe it is this looks like a team that's just gotten through, like, the first quarter of a season. Like, they're still making some basic mistakes, and they've got a lot of ground to catch up to get on the same page and play at the intensity level that they're going to need to face the Sixers in a play-in game or the Raptors in a play-in game. Or if things break the right way, get ready for the New York Knicks in a 7-game series in New York. There is still a lot of work for this team to do. But the first step to the Magic being who they needed to be was always just getting their guys back together. And boy, does it feel good to have Paolo Banchero, you know, driving his way to the basket, forcing his way to the basket, and getting a near triple-double. boy, does it look good to have Franz finding the wedges through the defense and getting to the basket. Boy, is it good to see the ball kicking out and spraying to three-point shooters the way that it was tonight. The freedom and confidence this team played with, we have not seen that since the win streak for sure. But frankly, we have not seen this kind of confidence and this kind of belief since December.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. Donovan Mitchell scored 31, Evan Mobley added 22 and 19 rebounds, and the Cavs beat the Hawks to keep the pressure on the teams above them in the East. Danny Cunningham from Locked On Cavs breaks down the victory.
The Cleveland Cavaliers get a 122-116 win over the Hawks on Wednesday night inside Rocket Arena in a game that I don't want to say the Hawks had to have, but the Hawks certainly wanted more than the Cavs. At least that's what you would have thought entering this game, because the Cavs are locked into the playoffs. They are locked into a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. Now they could move up to third, and we will have a conversation a little bit later about what could happen if they move up to third, whether or not they should want to move up to third, whether or not winning this game was in their best interest in terms of the standings. But winning this game in the fashion that which they played on Wednesday night was in the best interest of the Cavs in terms of sending a message, because this Atlanta Hawks team is a good one. I think the Hawks are a very good team. Now, I don't think that they are necessarily as good as the recent play. I think that they have beat up on a lot of poor teams on their schedule, and give them a lot of credit. You have to go out there and win the basketball games, but I do think that at times we can look into what happens in March and sometimes in April and some of the games on the schedule where you have a lot of teams that you're playing could be tanking, and maybe it turns into a bit of fool's gold. And Atlanta has gone on this awesome run, and they're a really, really good team. But I think the Cavs not only sent a message to Atlanta, but maybe to themselves, what they're capable of, because they played really well for most of this game. Now, it was not perfect, and there are things to clean up, and there are a lot of things that I think the Cavs can take away from this game as it relates to a potential playoff series against the Hawks. But I think the message is, if you're the Cavs, the message that they sent to Atlanta was, you needed this game. If you wanted to be in fifth, you needed this game, because now Atlanta does not control its own destiny to get that 5th seed. You've not made the playoffs in a few years. You needed this game to clinch a playoff berth. Now, I believe the Hawks are going to find a way to probably beat the Cavs on Friday night and clinch a playoff berth, and they will be inside the top 6. Like, I don't think that is going to be something that disappears, but you want to wrap that up as soon as you can. And this was the earliest opportunity for Atlanta, or at least the most recent one, because they did have an opportunity against New York the other night, and they lost that game too. But I think that this was you guys needed this. And the Cavs didn't. Like, if the Cavs lose this game, you could make an argument they would have been in better shape, because would have made it much more likely that they finish 4th. Now, I still would anticipate them to finish 4th, but losing this game would have made it a near lock had that been the case. And the Cavs went out there and they played hard. They didn't play perfect, but they played hard, and they did a lot of good things that I do think can be applicable to a potential playoff series against the Atlanta Hawks. I thought that the way the starting lineup worked for the Cavs was excellent. Dean Wade was back from that ankle injury. Donovan Mitchell was back after he missed a game on Monday against Memphis with an ankle injury. Jalen Tyson not back, but I don't think that he's far off, and we could see him on Friday in Atlanta. But this was a game in which the Cavs didn't need, and they put together the starting lineup that we should probably at this point expect to see in the playoffs. And what did that starting lineup do? 8 minutes and 24 seconds together, they outscored the Hawks by 17 points. Now, the bench left some stuff to be desired. And I think that there are legitimate questions about whether or not Dennis Schroeder fits in a series against the Atlanta Hawks. He was a minus 22 in 14 minutes in this game. That's when Atlanta made a lot. And it's not all Dennis's fault. Certainly, I'm not trying to put that on him. And I do think that if Jalen Tyson were healthy and available, I'm curious, one, if the Cavs would have played 10 guys, or two, if Jalen would have played instead of Dennis, if they still wanted to play 9 and keep that rotation number at 9. Because if that's the case, then I think the Cavs are even better situated for this potential matchup, and even a couple of other matchups that we're going to go into maybe a little blind if the Cavs play them. But this is I think, and one of the things too that Kenny Atkinson said after the game that resonated with me was he called it a good rep, because again, the Cavs had nothing to play for here, but they went out there and they treated this, I don't want to quite say like a playoff game, because you look at it, James Harden played 34 minutes in a playoff game. James Harden's playing 38, 39 minutes, and James didn't have some great game on Wednesday night either. Donovan Mitchell played just under 35 minutes. In a playoff game like this, Donovan Mitchell's probably playing 38 or 39 minutes. Evan Mobley played 36 minutes, which might be about what he plays in a playoff game. Maybe plays 37, 38, especially with how good he was in this game, because Evan was fantastic. Jared Allen played 29 minutes. I do think the knee is still bothering him a little bit, but you could see that being 31, 32. So I look at this, and Dean Wade only played 21, and he was, obviously, because he was in that starting 5, he was part of the best lineup that the Cavs had, where they really tightened up defensively. Like, I thought I was really impressed with the defensive intensity that the Cavs came out with, and it did not stay that way for the full 48 minutes. Like, this was not a full, complete 48-minute effort of basketball from the Cavs. It was not. The second quarter was rough, and there were parts of the fourth quarter that were certainly rough. I thought they slipped offensively in the second quarter, and I thought that led Atlanta to get some easy offense. And then once Atlanta was getting some easy offense, they were able to really figure things out and put up 38 points. But I do think it was a good thing that that's the only quarter that the Hawks scored more than 29 points in. So I think that you can look at what the Cavs did defensively as a positive here, because we did, at least in stretches, in the first quarter where the Cavs, that starting lineup, played awesome defensively. And Dean Wade is a big difference maker on that end of the floor. There's no doubt about that. I know that he leaves some stuff to be desired, but on a night like this, when he hits a couple threes, has a steal, has a block, makes a big defensive impact. And look at what Atlanta did too, because Jalen Johnson is probably going to be an all-NBA player this year. He's had a fantastic year for the Hawks. He was an all-star. He's had a really, really good year, and he had a really bad game on Wednesday night. Now, if the Cavs see the Hawks in the playoffs, do I expect Jalen Johnson to repeat this performance 5, 6, 7, however many games that series goes? No, of course not. Jalen Johnson is a better basketball player than what Jalen Johnson showed on Wednesday night. But I also think the Cavs had something to do with it. Like, I felt as if he was uncomfortable on the floor. And I think Dean Wade was part of that. I think Evan Mobley was part of that, because you look how the Cavs lined up defensively. And I wanted to pay like extra attention to matchups throughout this game, because Atlanta plays with a non-shooter on the wing. And you will see teams obviously play with a non-shooter. I mean, the Cavs do in Jared Allen. Like, he has taken 7 threes all year. He's just a guy that you don't have to respect, other than when he's setting screens more than 18 feet away from the basket. Well, Dyson Daniels is an 18% three-point shooter. Now, he made one, but if you watch the way that the Cavs defended him when he did not have the basketball, Jared Allen was his primary defender. And that meant that Donovan Mitchell or James Harden at times were defending Onyeka Okongwu, because Evan Mobley was defending Jalen Johnson or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Dean Wade was defending the other one. Like, that is something that I look at, say, okay, that can be part of the playoff blueprint. And then you look up Jalen Johnson's stat line, and he fouled out in 34 minutes, had 12 points, had 11 rebounds, had 6 assists, had 2 turnovers, 4 of 16 from the floor. Now, again, I would not anticipate, he probably in a 7-game series probably does not have another game that is as bad as the one he played. But I also think the Cavs can probably do a good enough job and probably have the personnel to limit him from being the all-NBA caliber player that he's been. And I don't think the Cavs need to shut him down the way that they did. I don't. But they can't let him be the guy he's been all season. And I think that the blueprint that they showed, now, I don't think that they showed all of their cards. I think there are other things, and Evan Mobley said as much after the game. And to reverse this too, the Hawks absolutely have other ways that they can attack the Cavs, that they can try and defend the Cavs. Not that I think that they really have the answers defensively against Cleveland, but they have other things that they can do that they did not show in this game. Like, I'm not going to sit here and act like the Hawks went all out and threw the kitchen sink at the Cavs and the Cavs played a vanilla basketball game. That's not true. I don't think either team played vanilla, but neither team threw everything out there in this game. I think that's probably the most fair way to put it. But I look at, and I've talked about this with the playoffs, and I talked about this on a Two Big Questions show last week, where basically which teams do the Cavs have solutions for? And I think the Cavs do have a lot of solutions for the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks are a very good team. They have not won all these games by accident. They've not gone from, I believe at one point they were 10th in the East, all the way up to 5th without being good. They're a good basketball team.
Another statement win from the Thunder yesterday. They beat the Clippers 128-110, stretched their winning streak to 7, and locked up the best record of the regular season for a third straight year. Rylan Stiles from Locked On Thunder has more.
With this win over the LA Clippers, the Thunder sweep the back-to-back between the Lakers and Clippers, and they clinch their third straight number one seed in the Western Conference. They win 128-110, and this team looks playoff ready, and now they're officially playoff ready, given that they have the top record in the West, they have the top record in the NBA, and yet they have home court advantage throughout the entire postseason. Look, this Thunder team has been nothing short of remarkable. Like when you really take a step back and look at this feat of 3 straight years of the number one seed, Chet Holmgren, Cason Wallace, like, they've only been 1 seeds in the NBA in their entire professional basketball careers. That's the only place that they've finished so far in their NBA journeys. And you look at this season, well, it's not going to be the 68-win season that OKC had a year ago. You look at how this schedule broke out for OKC. They went 24-2 in their first 26 games. They went 18-12 in the next 30, which is a 50-win pace. And you were all talking in the comments like the sky was falling. And we were pulling out Sam Presti quotes on this show, you everydayers know, about how the sky falls on every team once or twice a year. And that was the Thunder's version of the sky falling. They weren't playing sharp. They were not healthy. They didn't stay true to their 0-0 mentality, their 1 of 82 mentality in that segment. And in their worst stretch, they were 18-12. And then these last 24 games, they've been 22-2. Dominance. Dominance by the Thunder team. They're not going to win 68 games again this year. But they have won 60-plus games for 2 consecutive years. This season is the 3rd time since 2008 Oklahoma City has had a 60-plus win season. For as much talent as that first iteration of the Thunder had, with Harden, Westbrook, Durant, Carmelo, Paul George, a lot of future Hall of Famers passed through Oklahoma City. And that collection of talent won 60 games once, and they won 60 on the nose. You think about the 2 eras Oklahoma City has had, it's really remarkable. And the sustained success through 2 different eras has been something that you can't take for granted. And Oklahoma City now puts themselves in the best possible position to win a championship. They went wire to wire as the best team in the Western Conference. They went wire to wire as the best team in the NBA. They'll end the regular season as such. And now they enter the postseason looking to do something that hasn't been done since 2018 when those Golden State Warriors went back-to-back. They'll enter this postseason looking to buck the trend of parity in the NBA. A recent trend that arguably is happening for the first time in NBA history. The past champions since 2018 have failed to make it out of the second round. The Thunder not only have proven to still be the best team in basketball throughout this season, but they're healthier than they've ever been. Again, in this game, second night of back-to-back, the Thunder only sit out Thomas Sorber, of course, who's out for the entire season. They're playing their best basketball at the end of this year. You look up and down that roster today. Chet Holmgren is playing at an all-NBA level. SGA, who you couldn't have scripted a better season for than a year ago. I mean, this guy won the scoring title, was an all-star, first-team All-NBA, NBA MVP, Western Conference Finals MVP, NBA Finals MVP, won his first championship, was on the cover of NBA 2K, released his first signature shoe, and then released a colorway for every round of the playoffs as he continued to win. And then signed a Supermax. You could not have scripted a better season for Shea than you had a year ago. And SGA has gotten better. You saw that in this game. The live dribble playmaking, his ability to pull up off the dribble for three, those two things have not only made him better individually, but they have this team better equipped this year than they were a year ago. Chet Holmgren, what he did today has been a continuation of his first All-Star campaign. This should be an exclamation point to his first All-NBA campaign. And Chet Holmgren, who anchored a title team a year ago, is better now than he was then. Lou Dort, who has had a really bad season overall offensively, and he only had to play 21 minutes tonight, but he went 2 for 4 from 3. He made quick decisions. He helped this team win. 3 steals on the defensive end. Lou Dort did everything right, and Lou Dort's playing the best basketball of his season right now. J-Dub, the only thing missing from J-Dub's game is that three-point volume. Everything else is there. He can create off the bounce. He's explosive off the ball in his cuts. He's stellar defensively. He's moving at the proper pace, with the proper aggression, with the proper explosiveness. And you think of what he's been through this year, dealing with 3 separate issues, right? He had to surgically repair your wrist this summer, then 2 different hamstring strains. He's playing the best basketball of his season right now. Isaiah Hartenstein, he's better because the team around him is able to leverage him better than they were a year ago. AJ Mitchell, in the rotation, he's fixing a weakness of the team from a year ago where they really needed to find another ball handler. They trusted AJ Mitchell to step up in that role, and he's done that this season. And now he'll get his first taste of playoff basketball next week. Isaiah Joe. You can't talk enough about Isaiah Joe and how he's progressed. Another great game today. 4 for 7 from 3, 21 points. He was awesome. This team top to bottom. How confident are you whenever J-Will launches a 3 right now? On top of what else he can provide on the court. This team top to bottom is in a great spot.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big Six in 60. The Falcons are dealing with a big change up front after Caleb McGarry retired, and they moved quickly by reportedly signing Jawaan Taylor to help fill that spot. Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons has more on the move.
Big changes for the Falcons offensive line. As we discussed on yesterday's episode with Trayshawn Diaz, the Falcons are going to run it back with all 5 of their starters. Well, we found out today that is not going to be the case, as they will have a new starting right tackle in Jawaan Taylor. We'll break down what he's going to bring to the table and whether or not the Falcons scheme can solve his penalty issues. And the reason for Taylor being in the building now is because Kaleb McGary had a somewhat unexpected retirement. We'll break down why it wasn't as big a surprise as maybe it would seem. But what's notable before we get to that is that I did talk with Kevin of the Falcoholic about 30 minutes we recorded before McGary's retirement was announced. So I don't think it's going to be as much of a topic on today's episode, but tomorrow, our next episode, when we get into the bulk of the remainder of that conversation with Kevin about trade backs and whatnot, we will be talking about the offensive tackle, and just know that we didn't know that Kaleb McGary was not going to be here. But, obviously talking about the immediate impact of McGary's retirement, it creates a significant hole for the Falcons to fill at right tackle. They obviously were able to quickly do that at Jawaan Taylor, but, that's more of a stopgap. We'll get into that more a little bit later. As I said, not super surprised that Kaleb McGary hung them up, right? It's unexpected that it happened now. I kind of was thinking this would probably happen next year, right? And we've been talking about this on the pod for several years. This has kind of been Kaleb McGary's plan all along, right? That he gets paid, he uses that money to build a bunker somewhere in an undisclosed location in the Pacific Northwest, and lives in that bunker and proceeds to wage war with the United States government. And I'm kidding on that last point, but if you know anything about Ruby Ridge, that is kind of I imagine Kaleb McGary is like that's how I want to go out. But it's notable to me because if Kaleb McGary had retired a year ago, I think by and large the fan base would have been like good riddance. And I know there are still people out there that are still like good riddance with Kaleb McGary, but it did feel fascinating to me to watch kind of the tide kind of turn on how people view Kaleb McGary due to, absence makes the heart grow fonder, as we found out last year with him missing all of last season with a knee injury. And I feel like Falcon fans finally started to appreciate what Kaleb McGary brings to the table, which is that toughness, that physicality, that run blocking ability. And so I think, moving forward with the Falcons, they're going to lose something in that regard. I think much will be made about, who's going to protect Michael Penix and Tua's blind side, as it was made last August when McGary first went down and Penix was the starting quarterback. Like I said then, I feel like that notion is a little bit overblown. As we mentioned back then, like Kaleb McGary was never a elite pass protector by any means. We talked about him being like a 4 out of 10 pass protector in that regard. And so that's not going to be a player that's particularly hard to replace. But the thing, again, that Kaleb McGary brought to the table was like being that 8 out of 10, or on a good day, a 9 or 10 out of 10 run blocker. And that is going to be a lot harder for the Falcons to replace. So it's not to sit here and go like, oh, I saw this coming. But there's a reason why on recent episodes, including the one I recorded with Kevin Knight, but also with Trayshawn, and I believe an episode or two over the last week or so, we've kind of been sprinkling and sowing the seeds of like the Falcons drafting an offensive tackle with a high pick, because it did feel like there was a ticking clock on Kaleb McGary. And after this season, the Falcons were going to move on from him, and to try to get his replacement in the building would have been a smart decision by the Falcons. And so like we've been kind of moving in that direction of like talking about offensive tackle being, a priority need for this team. And so I think his retirement doesn't necessarily really change that. And so it's not like, oh, this is throwing a big, wrench into the Falcons, machine plans, whatever you want to call it. It's just more that like, oh, the timeline is a little faster, right? Where it's just like, oh, you're going to need a guy potentially to come in and compete for a starting spot right away. But then the Falcons went out in like less than an hour after McGary retirement was announced. They were able to sign Jawaan Taylor. So clearly an indication that, the Falcons didn't do this out of the blue, that they kind of knew this was coming. Probably more than likely, McGary either did not show up or did show up for the offseason program that began on Tuesday and was like, look, I don't have it anymore. And so the Falcons have been, operating with that in mind over the last 24 hours, and we're ultimately able to land Jawaan Taylor. As I mentioned before, the Falcons moved pretty quickly, less than an hour after, or I think it was, again, I don't know the exact time, but it was around 3 something that McGarry's retirement was announced, and it was around 4 something when it was announced that the Falcons had signed, ex-Chiefs right tackle Jawaan Taylor on a 1-year deal worth $5 million with a couple more $1 million in incentives. And if you're worried about, how this signing is going to affect the Falcons comp pick formula, it doesn't, because Taylor was cut by the Chiefs, and cut players don't count towards the comp pick formula. If you're curious about the Falcons cap situation after this point, I'm like, why? Like, what moves are you expecting the Falcons to make? Again, I know I talked about Dexter Lawrence the other day on the podcast, but that was more of a thought experiment. That's my bad for, I got hit up by a lot of people thinking that I thought that move was on the horizon. And I was like, I don't think that move's on the horizon. Just, I needed 5 minutes to fill on a podcast, guys. So we talked about Dexter Lawrence trade as being like, oh, there's like a 2% chance that could happen. But don't worry about that. I wouldn't be too caught up in the salary cap situation. Free agency is over. So what's the point of having cap space? There is a point beyond that, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know why you're worried about how much cap space the Falcons have, because they ain't spending that money. Is basically the larger point I'm trying to make. But I thought the Falcons would wait until after the draft before signing a veteran offensive tackle. But once again, Ian's like, nah, we ain't doing that. We're going to make sure that we are not pressed for any needs going into the draft. So they pounced quickly on Jawaan Taylor. He was from the same draft class as Caleb McGarry in that 2019 draft class. He was expected to be like a top 10 pick that year, and wound up falling to round 2. I think mostly because of some injury concerns that he had. Wound up being picked by the Jaguars. Spent 4 years there, signed with the Chiefs in 23. The Chiefs made him one of the highest paid right tackles in the league. I think he was the first $20 million a year right tackle, although I think technically they signed him to play left tackle for them. But then they signed Donovan Smith after the draft, and they moved him back to right tackle, where he played the previous 4 years with the Chiefs. The thing that you probably know about Jawaan Taylor, if you know anything about Jawaan Taylor, is his infamy when it comes to his tendency to get false starts, trying to, time the snap and jumping a little early. But I looked it up. He has gotten better in terms of cutting down on the false starts this past year, right? His first year in Kansas City, he had 9 false starts. Second year, it was 7. And then this past year, it was only 2. Now, what's changed is the illegal formations, have increased that other sort of pre-snap penalty, going from 2 in 23, 2 in 24 to 4 this past year. So still a high mark, but not nearly as egregious an issue as it was earlier in his career. The other issue with the penalties is the holding calls. He had 8 in 23, 8 in 24, and still 6 this past year in 2025. And playing, I think he played like 700 snaps instead of the 1,000 snaps he played in previous years. So when you do the math on it, it doesn't look great. And when you do the overall math on the penalty rate for Jawaan Taylor, his career, he has been penalized once every 81 snaps. In Kansas City, the last 3 years is once every 58 snaps. If you're curious how that compares to Elijah Wilkinson, who we complained quite a bit with his tendency to false start, I think he had 9 false starts last year. Wilkinson was penalized overall once every 91 snaps. So Taylor, much higher rate of penalties, almost twice the rate from Wilkinson last year. And then you compare that to Caleb McGarry, who rarely gets penalized, relatively speaking, where he only has gotten penalized, I think, once every 267 snaps over the last 3 seasons. And then over his careers, once every 296 snaps. So essentially, Caleb McGarry is only getting penalized like 3 times a year, while, Jawaan Taylor, that number is like 12 plus. So it's like, I think the actual math is like 4.5 times the rate, or whatever that number is. So, I think the thing with Taylor is he's a good pass protector, if you can excuse the penalties. The downside of Taylor is that he's generally been considered a weak run blocker. He's been consistently one of the weakest graded run blockers in the NFL, according to PFF. When you look at, the Chiefs' rushing success when running behind the right tackle, according to PFF, they've averaged about 3.6 yards per carry, which is down over the last 2 seasons, which is down from the 5.6 that the Falcons have averaged running behind their right tackle, according to PFF, over the last 2 years, right? Which is notable because, we were very worried about a big drop off in the run production with Wilkinson last year. And that number was roughly the same as it was with Caleb McGarry. And so, to Wilkinson's credit, which I know we don't like to give Elijah Wilkinson too much credit, given some recent comments he made about the team and the fan base, on social media as of late. But he did a solid job holding it down there.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. The Texans picked up their fifth-year options on both C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson, locking in two cornerstone players through the 2027 season. John Hickman from Locked On Texans explained what that means for Atlanta going forward.
C.J. Stroud is now due $25 million in 2027, while Will Anderson Jr. is due $21 million in 2027. North of 25 and 21 for both of those players, respectively. Still life-changing numbers. So if they run across this podcast, help a brother out, right? But I still think Houston gets the extension done with Will Anderson Jr. first. And this is not a bad thing, guys. Like, when we look at the fifth-year option being picked up, and I know the thought could be for some people, why wait, right? Why allow a player to operate on that fifth-year option and then jeopardize that player maybe leaving the team after he has an excellent, outstanding 2026 season, and then after that you look at the 2027 year, which is how long they'll be under contract. If they ball out 2 years in a row, yesterday's price could not be today's price. That could be a scenario where what you thought you was going to give me in 2025 and 2026 may not be the case once that contract extension hits after 2027. And I completely understand that thought, but I say this is not a bad thing because teams look to keep players long-term all the time. And when they look to keep those young players long-term, picking up the fifth-year option is just a natural decision, right? It ensures at least one more year under contract for that player. The fifth-year option also gives teams more time to agree on a contract extension with said player. And in this case, I think this is what's going to happen with Will Anderson Jr. I believe between now and the start of the regular season, we're going to get that contract extension. Breaking news from the Houston Texans regarding Will Anderson Jr. Now, on the other side of that coin, picking up the fifth-year option could mean, hey, we need to see what this player is about before investing a ton of money into a Jag. Right? And what's a Jag? Just a guy. And I think this may be the case for C.J. Stroud, whom, by the way, both D'Amico, Nick Caserio, they've talked extremely highly of C.J. Stroud. So I believe that they love the young man. The quarterback position and the play of the quarterback position has to rise. And why do I believe Will Anderson Jr. get signed or get the extension before C.J. Stroud? It all comes down to when the Houston Texans had an opportunity to really stamp themselves to an AFC Championship game and ultimately the Super Bowl, right? Will Anderson Jr. had 3.5 sacks in one game. C.J. Stroud had 4 turnovers. You reward what the player who is doing everything that you're asking of them, you reward that player. The Texans have asked the quarterback in the offense all together, let's run the ball well, right? And let's take care of the ball. Well, C.J. Stroud wasn't able to take care of the ball. And that's just the facts, and I think it's important to look at. We have to keep this in mind. Having the two under contract, essentially, with that extension until 2028, the 2028 season, that keeps Houston competitive for another offseason, which is very important for a team that loves those one-year contract windows, that Nick Caserio special, right? But think about this for a second. And I know I'm jumping ahead, but CJ Stroud could very well end up in a Dak Prescott-esque situation. Obviously, Dak didn't have a fifth year, being a fourth-round pick, but in the sense that it could be a while before we see the long-term commitment from the team. Dak was franchise tagged twice before receiving his extension after the second franchise tag for the following year. I can see a scenario where Houston exercises that fifth-year option and franchises Stroud for another season after the option. Houston could do that. Stroud could potentially sign for north of $55 million, right? The current franchise tag for quarterbacks is currently $43.89 million. That increased by $3 million from 2 seasons ago. So essentially in 2 seasons, the max for a quarterback and the floor for the quarterback franchise tag could raise again, but there will still be a difference between one another, right? Houston could find themselves still wanting more from CJ Stroud, but also realizing the market for the quarterback position isn't worth moving on from him. And I think in many ways, like when Dak got franchise tagged twice, I think it was an ego thing from the general manager, owner, and family, the Jones family. But I also think that they felt like maybe in some ways is Dak the reason why we're not winning in the playoffs. Now, granted, CJ Stroud is in a much more unique situation as to where if you flip the quarterbacks, if you put Dak in Houston, Texas are Super Bowl champions this past season, right? And so if Stroud could raise his level of play to that of a Dak Prescott before the injury in 2019, that's when he gets franchise tagged in 2020. The following 2 seasons before the extension, Dak Prescott essentially has some very good numbers, right? You match that with that defense, totally different situation surrounding CJ Stroud and the Texans altogether. Like, we're probably still on a Super Bowl high if you switch out the 2 players. But what I am getting at is essentially this isn't anti-Stroud getting paid. I want the young man to get paid. I think CJ Stroud, in a lot of ways, I mean, what more would you want to ask for from a franchise quarterback, right? The only trouble that we have seen from CJ Stroud has been taking home Amber Rose to her car or wherever he took her. I'm not trying to speculate here. But what I am saying is in 3 seasons, Stroud is not in trouble, right? And so I think he fits the mold of what you want from a franchise quarterback, aside from the second round of the playoff woes. He has to get over that, no doubt about it. This is not anti-Stroud getting paid. This is looking at the Texans and realizing they have a few ways to extend their championship window, and a part of that process could look like re-upping on Stroud until committing long-term, because I doubt Stroud would get the 3-year deal. I think Stroud will probably be the first Houston Texan to get the 4-year deal under Nick Caserio. That was not a player that was drafted where you automatically get 4 years. I'm looking at extensions here. Nico 3 years, Stingley 3 years. You look at how he's restructured and then extend the player out. So for Danielle Hunter, another year. This will be his 3rd year. Dalton Schultz 3 years, things of that nature. But I think when you look at the quarterback position, the market is what the market is going to be. Not too much fluctuating with the market unless you have a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 quarterback or a journeyman quarterback. But when it comes to the years, if Nick Caserio can pull off a 3-year deal with CJ Stroud, yeah, we will talk about him a little bit differently on how he changed the game. Other than that, I see a 4-year deal. I see CJ Stroud between $50 to $60 million, especially if he capitalizes and rebounds, actually, if he capitalizes on what Houston has presented with him this offseason, Foster, the new offensive line, Montgomery, things of that nature, what they'll provide him in the draft, offensively with Tank Dell coming back and bounce back from this past season, then he's going to get that money he's looking for. If he doesn't, then maybe you look at under $50 million. Still hard to kind of see how teams view quarterbacks, but ultimately overall, I want to see Stroud get paid, but he has to do a few things. And the Houston Texans picking up his fifth-year option was the smartest decision because essentially, once again, both with Will Anderson and C.J. Stroud, I think will get paid first. They'll be able to Dak Prescott, C.J. Stroud a couple of times where franchise tag, extension. In the case of Stroud, 50 option, franchise tag, extension. If he doesn't do what is deemed whatever the Texans want to see from him. And I think that's cutting down turnovers, that's increasing red zone play and the offense altogether and getting into the end zone a lot more.
The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, the extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It just makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. As we round out the regular season, the Celtics play the Knicks in Madison Square Garden tonight. Line is at -5 on FanDuel. If you want to go the other way, Boston money line is 176, plus 176 on that line. Head over to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Florida picked up a major recruiting win with Maxwell Hiller, one of the top offensive linemen in the 2027 class and the highest-ranked commit yet under John Summerall. Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators has his take on that commitment.
Wow. Who predicted that one, right? Who predicted that one? The Florida Gators landed Maxwell Hiller right now, which, I mean, look, it's not a big surprise that he ended up committing to the Florida Gators, unless you are a Florida Gators fan that has just been pummeled by, oh, well, you know, they got this offensive lineman on campus. They got this offensive lineman being recruited. Then sure, it came as a surprise. But don't forget, Maxwell Hiller, who he's listed by most services as an interior offensive lineman or just an outright offensive lineman. And the reason for that, the purpose behind him being listed as an interior offensive lineman or just an offensive lineman, is that his film is at left tackle. A lot of people project him to play guard at the next level. Personally, I don't care. And I don't think Troutwine cares that much, to be honest with you. I think we've reached a point in college football and professional football as well, where we're no longer going, oh, this guy doesn't have this trait, so he can't play tackle, unless it's your quick feet. And Maxwell Hiller has the footwork, I believe, to work at offensive tackle, okay, and to succeed at offensive tackle. You watch the film. Before I even say watch the film, right? Before we even talk about saying watch the film, just go to Google and put Maxwell Hiller Huddle, Hudl. And before you even watch the film itself, he has one clip at the very top that is, I think it's like 3 or 4 laughing emojis. And then you click it. And what it is he drops into a set. He engages with the defender. He then runs with the defender all the way downfield and puts the defender on his ass and the referee right in the way. Puts them all on the ground. That's the kind of guy that the Florida Gators just got on their offensive line. And again, it is important to remember that you've got Phil Troutwine there now. And Phil Troutwine is an excellent offensive line coach, an excellent offensive line developer. And by the way, those aren't necessarily the same thing. He's both. An excellent offensive line coach can say, hey, I'm going to get the most out of my that may be. Right. And like Q said, hit the like, people. We just got a 5-star commit. I almost forgot how to mentally process the sentence. The Gators have secured a commitment from a 5-star offensive line recruit. Well, ain't done yet. Just going to throw that one out there for you. But I think an offensive line coach can get his guys to play like a unit. It doesn't necessarily mean that any individual got technically better. It means that you can get your guys to play like a unit. It means you can get your guys to perform. Phil Troutwine does that. He's done that his entire career. Okay. An offensive line developer is the guy that goes, hey, your hand placement, your footwork, all that stuff. We help you get better there. And Phil Troutwine has proven that he can do that consistently. And I'm just saying, every time I've been in this house, Florida does something pretty good on the offensive line. In fact, the last time I was in this very house, Phil Troutwine got hired to be the offensive line coach of the Florida Gators. And then I walked through the door, and actually, before I even get into the door, Maxwell Hiller is a Florida Gator. The offensive line for the Florida Gators is finally going to be respectable. Offensive line recruiting is finally going to be respectable. And man, I mean, does it feel good or what to know that I'm not going to say the Florida Gators are back, but they are serious again. They are relevant again. And landing Maxwell Hiller, that's a huge addition for the Florida Gators. Literally, figuratively, in any way you could possibly mean it. You just added a 5-star plus, which, by the way, if you see 5-star plus anywhere, and you want to know what that means, that's Rivals /On3. That's their way of saying, hey, this guy's a 5-star on every unanimous 5-star. Everyone is in agreement that Maxwell Hiller is a top 8 player in the 2027 recruiting class. And everyone can look at his profile right now on Rivals, on 24/7, on ESPN. And you know what you'll see when you go to Maxwell Hiller's profile on any of those? You'll see that beautiful Gator head right there. You'll see that beautiful Gator logo right there. Maxwell Hiller mentioned during his March visit, hey, I could commit this summer or I could commit real soon. We'll find out. And now it is time for the spring game this weekend. And you just added Maxwell Hiller to the class and potentially adding your quarterback to the class?
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.